Welcome to the Million Vegan Grandmothers podcast. And today I have the honor of interviewing Bobby Sud. Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, Bobby does so much great work for our plant-based and vegan movements, and he is in LA right now with Animal Save Movement. He is a cinematographer, has worked with Sean Monson from Earthlings for 7 years, and heads up many other projects. So this is the life force, the energetics that we really want to bring to the world. People like Bobby and this tireless energy to do what's right and do what's kind and do what's compassionate and heal human, earth, and animals into complete liberation. That's what heal actually should mean, not just for humans. So thank you, Bobby.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This is great. Well, let's dive right in. Tell me a little bit about some of the projects you're working on that you're super excited about and some of the work you've done in the past and what you feel that impact has had on the world.
Yeah, I've like you said, I worked with Sean Monson for 7 years now, and I'm currently helping him shoot two different projects right now that I can't talk about yet. I shot all the animal footage for Moby's film, punk rock vegan movie. And I've worked with Generation Vegan on a few projects and directed a video series with them. And right now I'm working with We Animals Media, which was started by Joanne MacArthur. And we're an animal photojournalism group. And I'm currently working on publishing a book of photography that photos I've documented over the last 6 years of animals in transport from farms to slaughterhouses.
Yeah, be a very impactful book. Tell me what happens for you in those moments when you're taking those photos. What is it like to be Bobby in those moments?
Um, there's nothing harder, there's nothing more difficult that I've experienced than, say, being on the kill floor of a slaughterhouse, looking through a lens at an animal who's about to die, and then making it aesthetically pleasing, because I know that that's going to have the biggest impact. Even though, even if I were physically able to, run over there and stop them from killing the animal, it would only be for a moment. This is a slaughterhouse. I'm not going to run away with a cow. So those are difficult moments, but I remember the first time that I ever went inside a slaughterhouse was with Sean Monson, and this is like my very first day ever documenting any animal rights or animal cruelty things ever. And Sean just stopped me right before we went in, and he's like, "Hey, listen, poker face, poker face, poker face." So I was fortunate to have someone like Sean Monson as a mentor in doing things like that. It's not as easy as Sean makes it out to be. I think Sean is very cerebral. He's highly intelligent, and he's able to intellectualize what he's seeing better than some people, better than myself. So, yeah.
So when you say make the photos aesthetically pleasing, do you mean present them in a way that people can really see the beauty, the real life of the animal?
Yeah. I mean, every photographer has their own distinct style or image or something that they're trying to portray in their photos. Um, I'm also talking about the technical, like, is it in focus? Is the lighting correct? Is my f-stop, do I have enough light coming in the camera? Things like that. Is my shutter speed fast enough? And then to frame it in a way that conveys a message that I think is important. So, which that degree of separation that's created between the camera and the event does help a little bit, but
Yeah. I mean, Yes. Yes. I can't even imagine. I mean, I can because I've been in those places. Um, so when you take these photos, what is the impact that it has on the public? So we're not just talking about vegans, because sometimes we get tired of sharing our work with other vegans who are already converted. But what do you
Yeah.
think the impact is on other people?
Uh, I just hope it has the same impact that I try to have if I'm doing outreach on the street. I'm not trying to get anybody to be vegan because I think that's an unreasonable expectation. I'm just trying to get people to listen, and I hope that it just has that kind of impact where it's an image that people will be willing to look at because it's somehow captivating and honest, and so that they're willing to listen to a photo that's showing the reality of our animal-based food system.
Hmm. Well, you know what they say about a photo saying a
Yeah.
thousand words, and we know when we try to talk about veganism, that can get in the way. But art, I'm doing a presentation in the upcoming Convergence on October 28th and 29th through Climate Healers. The Million Vegan Grandmothers is part of the Climate Healers organization. And I'm doing the art of veganism, and we have some incredible artists that are sharing through music and film and poetry and the written word. And as a poet, I know that's one way I can convey what's deeply in my heart without it feeling judgmental to the person that's listening. I'm just saying what's in my heart. Yeah.
I mean, one of my favorite poets is Mary Oliver, who, doesn't outright say, I mean, I believe she was vegetarian just from her poems and how she talks about never wearing an animal's fur in some of her poems. Uh, but she has a way of not being so direct and in your face, but at the same way conveying this idea of going out in nature, standing in awe of it, and remembering how to see it, you know.
It's all about remembering. I joined a group of vegan elders the other day in prayer, and that theme came up a lot. It's the remembering and helping humans remember, that remember that we are the species that can change this all. And that's our only quote unquote dominion we have, is that we are supposed to be caretakers, right? That is,
Have to remember to be understanding. Like I know that we very much want everyone to understand us, but we can't forget to be understanding ourselves. And I think that gets in our way. Um, and it's like ridicule there's nothing easier than that, right? It doesn't require anything. It asks nothing of you. I don't need to know anything about someone to ridicule them, but understanding and compassion for who someone else is, they are a human being having a human experience. And the fact that even though I'm vegan, I wasn't born vegan, and I can understand where they're coming from. And for example, as a seventh generation Texan, I can understand why somebody enjoys the barbecue culture of Texas. I can, I can't lie to myself and say, I just don't get that anymore. Of course I do, you know, and I have to be willing to understand why someone would be attracted to that. Because if I'm not willing to validate their experience and where they are in their lives, then they won't do the same for me.
yeah, thank you for that reminder, because I also didn't grow up vegan, and it was really connected to our ceremony, our traditions, our joy. And it's to ask a person to switch that, it requires some understanding. And I love taking apart words, and I think about understand. So standing underneath them, almost like to lift them up. But by doing that, you have to get underneath and really get into the depth of what's going on for a person. So thank you for being that representation, like as the grandmothers are. My grandchildren aren't being raised vegan, and I am not going to love them less. But it is the hottest conversation that we have. I will tell you, it's like, oh, my dad says vegans can't be strong. We said, well, let's watch some movies. And then it ended up the end of that week. For some reason, my 6-year-old grandson wanted me to arm wrestle with his mom. And I'm thinking, no way, because she lifts a lot of heavy weights. And I'm like, yeah, there's no way. And she actually couldn't put me down because I could hold my core. I'm a massage therapist. I'm a yogi. And I'm like, wow, she couldn't arm wrestle me down. It was actually quite baffling. And I don't mean that arrogantly, but it was just all these little supports I feel that we get from the divine, just being consciously awakening, not that we claim to be completely awake, but awakening on this journey. I think we get a lot of support from something much greater. And you're right. I understand my daughter. I understand the dilemma she's in, having a husband that's a heavy meat eater, even though she doesn't eat meat very often at all, or flesh food. And she feels it would alienate her away from everyone except me. And she already knows she has my unconditional love. So thank you. It is so important for vegans to understand, to really deeply understand. And I believe that we're in a really deep crisis on the planet. I mean, we know that. And in so many areas, our sacred sovereignty is being taken away, just like it has been for the animals. Like Will Tuttle made that connection many years ago in the World Peace Diet. And so it's really important for us to understand people do not have a huge bandwidth to deal with a lot of loss. And for them, losing a diet that connects them with their community and their family is just too much to bear.
Also, psychology involved in that. That we have survival instincts, that this is evolved since the moment human beings first stepped foot on this planet. We're talking hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. And part of that is safety, and community is safety. And if you feel like, losing your community means you're all alone, that's a very unsafe place to be. That's a very scary thought, right? And we have to understand the psychology involved in why somebody might struggle with making that choice. But, to your point, you're talking about, I was with Ocean Robbins. I was in a video series that he did. And this woman asked him about her daughter, who was just graduating college and was no longer plant-based and was making decisions that, from whatever she read, thought were in her best interest, and how she should deal with that, being a vegan and a mother of a daughter who's no longer vegan. And what Ocean said was like so profound, and it was so simple. He said, tell your daughter that I'm proud that you're making decisions as an adult that you believe are in your best interest. And I love you more than I dislike your choices. And that's really, it's not that hard to understand. That's not that hard to be there. I think we're all really there, but we just fight it sometimes,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, are we going to love our children less because they make different choices? And that's included right across the board with everything that's coming down in our world right now. Look at how much separation has happened since COVID, between families and communities. And so if we choose a love-based compassion and understanding and say, like Sailesh says to Kamaya, whatever choices you make, Dr. Sailesh Rao, he said, I will always still love you just the same.
Yeah. We're never going to hate enough to create a kinder world. That math doesn't add up. Right. And I get like vegan animal rights activists when it's your first year in it, and it seems like every day you're learning about some new horrible thing you didn't know about that's happening to animals on the planet. And so you're going to be angry. I get it. That makes sense. That makes sense to anybody, right? And I understand having this grace period of about a year, but after a year, I mean, I don't want to sound cruel, but in a way, you have to get over yourself. And what I mean by that is, like, you're angry, okay, fine, right? But how does your anger help? Like, how does responding with anger help? You can be angry, okay? But in dealing with other people and in dealing with the problems that we have, how does anger help? It doesn't. It just creates a greater divide.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. My partner and I have been writing a book that came to me a couple of years ago that I wanted to write, and it's called Grief Mapping, and it's mapping out a grief. And the analogy for me is, or the really heartfelt sense, I work with people very intimately. I'm a massage therapist. I'm a life coach, and I have a background in social work. And I really couldn't stay on the front lines of that any more than I could with the animals, because I can't do certain things. We all can do certain things. That's not what I can do. That depth of suffering, I need to kind of work on another level. But the one thing that is really very real for me is that people need space to change. They need enough safety. And if they can map out some of their grief and kind of move beyond what we kind of felt that the first 5 stages of Kubler-Ross, or Kubler-Ross's 5 stages, were almost like the first 5 stages of grief that you go through before we start through our 5 stages that my partner and I have written about. And the first one in our stage was the felt sense shock. So Kubler-Ross talks about denial, like, oh, this can't be that bad. And then the anger, and then the apathy or the depression, and then going into acceptance. So you get to acceptance, but ours starts with the felt sense shock. It's like, oh my God, this is really going on.
Yeah.
And then we go into compassion and empathy for ourselves, for others, of all beings. And then we move into creative action. And then we have 2 other steps about community and finding different pathways to heal, like you have done. But I think unless we actually feel the shock of what goes on, and then we have a deep empathy and compassion for ourselves, we need to move it into creative action. And that is what I did when my son died. I couldn't save him. Every time I put him on a plant-based diet and I fed him lots of green juice, his heart was failing. He would start to recover. And then he would go back to his friends, go have beer and chicken wings and whatever they did. I didn't love him any less. I couldn't keep him here. And would he have completely healed? I don't know. But I do know that it would never have helped me to have tried to nag him home, I literally allowed him his own process. And as a mother, that was one of the most major personal healings I've ever done as a human, to know my son was dying and know I couldn't do anything about it, and that maybe going to a plant-based diet might have healed him. So I would love to hear a little bit more about some of your other projects, Animal Save, what it was like working and is like working with Sean, and sounds like you two have a very creative flow together.
Yeah, I love working with Sean. We have the same sort of passion for storytelling and for film in general. And obviously, Sean Monson, director of Earthlings, which I think is arguably the most important animal rights film ever made. It was the first of its kind. And so working with him has been a dream and a nightmare, a dream because I never thought that I would be in a position to have the kind of impact that I've had. Working with someone like Sean, getting the access and being able to create work that is profound. At the same time, it comes at quite a cost. But I can tell you that right now, Sean is directing a documentary about Dr. Michael Greger that I'm helping him shoot. And it's on Michael Greger's book, How Not to Die, which has been very cool. Dr. Greger is hilarious. And,
isn't he fun? He's so fun.
He is. Sean just produced A Day in the Life of a Farmed Animal, which was directed by Alessio Chiazza, which was based on the Ridley Scott concept. Ridley Scott did this film, A Day in the Life, for human beings, where it was people starting at like 7 a.m. to the end of the day all around the world, what they were doing, sort of this. And that's what Alessio took that concept and applied it to farmed animals. And it's out right now. They released it on World Day for Farmed Animals. And it's about 40 minutes, but it's really powerful. It's a non-narrative. So it's just watching from 7 a.m. what farmed animals are going through all around the world. Some of them in factory farms, some of them in sanctuaries. It doesn't show any animals being killed. I know whenever Sean's name is attached to something, everyone thinks it's going to be a horror show. But I'm not saying there aren't some difficult scenes, but you will not see any animals die. And I think that's important because while Earthlings was incredibly successful, I can tell you why I watched it. I was getting my degree in documentary filmmaking, and I heard about this film, and all the students with me were like, "Have you heard about this film, Earthlings?" We weren't vegan. It's supposed to be like a torture fest to watch, and we watched it out of morbid curiosity because we had no idea, right? And I think that now non-vegans know, like when we talk about like films like Dominion, and it's harder to get them to watch those films. So we have to take a slightly softer approach now. And I think that films like A Day in the Life do that. And then I'm working on publishing a book of my photography that I've captured over the last 7 years, documenting animals in transport. So that I was having dinner with somebody during the pandemic, and they asked, "What am I going to be doing now that?" Because LA Animal Safe had put a pause, obviously, on vigils. We couldn't have a gathering of 100 people during the pandemic. And I said, "Well, I was thinking of maybe selling some of my photos." And this friend of mine looked at me and said, "Listen, I love your photography, but I can't have it on my wall." And I said, "Yeah, that makes sense." And he suggested a book. So that's what I'm doing. And then, but also, Animal Safe Movement is right now very much pushing the plant-based treaty, which was modeled after the Green New Deal, but instead of focusing on fossil fuels, which we do a little bit, it is basically trying to convince city and state governments and industries to move away, or at least stop funding more animal-based food systems and start funding plant-based food systems so that we can reclaim farmland, replenish by replanting trees to restore the climate.
That's perfect. The grandmothers have just started writing a letter this morning to Marianne Williamson. She was one of my spiritual teachers many years ago. The first book I read when I was quite young was A Return to Love, based on the Course in Miracles, after I was a Course in Miracles student. And Dr. Sailesh Rao met her at the Parliament of World Religions. And she said, "Well, I'd like to kind of be vegan, but I don't know, it's kind of hard when I'm traveling." And so the grandmothers are writing a letter saying, we'll definitely want to get plant-based treaty involved. And we are saying to her, we will make sure you have vegan food in every one of your cities that you're going to be going to in the US. So we'll see if she responds and commits, because she can have a huge impact in the public light. And that's the problem. I mean, it's not a judgment, just a thank you for your beautiful spiritual work and your care for humanity and poverty and making sure everyone gets fed. But yet, we have enough food 7 times over if we stop growing food for animal agriculture. And so it's not a shortage of food, hoarding of resources.
Yeah, if just the US alone stopped, farming animals, we could end world hunger more than 7 times over worldwide. Because and that's even without adding like more farms for growing more. The amount of food we're growing right now is more than enough.
It's crazy, isn't that? And same with Canada. We have a huge amount of farmland. Yeah, that's going to feed the animals in animal agriculture. And yeah, Dr. Gabriel Cousins, one of my mentors and teachers, says it's definitely a hoarding of resources. It's not a lack of food. And I think it's really important when we're doing our spiritual work, such as Marianne Williamson, saying that, the most important thing is to feed people, to make sure people are fed and cared for. And so it's very important when we're out in the public eye to talk truth, that we do have plenty enough food. It's not a shortage. So yes. Well, this has been a real delight. Tell us how the grandmothers can support you in your projects. We would love to be part of different organizations. Susan Hargrave is one of our grandmothers, and one of our elders, because you don't have to be even a female or a grandmother biologically to join the grandmothers, because in a grandmother community there's the whole tribe, and everyone is welcome. So anyone is available to join the grandmothers and support us. We would like to have a very large international presence at one point, so that when the grandmothers walk out just saying we will not allow this feminine rights, our feminine divines to be squashed in the care of our grandchildren of all species, and one day walk out around the world for the calves. It's going to be hard to ignore us when there's plenty of us joining together. So thank you. And I just would love to end if you talked a little bit more about how the grandmothers can help, and how you feel we can start this deep movement throughout the vegan movement of understanding. I'm really moved by that what we need to do is understand. It requires way more work than to judge.
Yeah. It does. I think so. When I started my, I'll say, plant-based journey at first, I was 300 pounds. I was type 2 diabetic. I had high cholesterol, high blood pressure, heart disease, hypertension, all of those things, all the things that come with someone who eats a standard American diet in excess. And I was someone who was very fit in high school. This happened after college. And I remember I had to change my mentality. Every diet that I had had before that was about me hating how I looked or how I felt, right? And so every action I took was a reminder of how much I hated myself, or how much I hated how I felt, or hated my life, whatever. And I had to change to looking at preparing a plant-based, low-fat, vegan meal as an act of self-love and self-care. I had to change to not that I hate myself and hate how I feel, but I love myself. I'm going to treat myself the way I should be treated. And I love what I'm doing for myself and how I'm going to feel. And I saw that not only with just my diet, but in terms, like, after I lost 40 pounds, I said, okay, I'm going to go back to the gym. And I was so worried. I was so worried about what all the alpha male and females what I thought they were going to think, right? What I was going to be projecting onto them, and like what my exercise was going to look like. Because I know, for me, I thought it was going to be pathetic, right? But it wasn't. But all I found was nothing but love and support, especially from the alphas, who were like, every time I hit a milestone, were like celebrating me and cheering me on. And I think this speaks to how much more we can accomplish if we choose a love-based approach instead of a hate or a shame-based approach, right? There's a reason you don't make fun of someone who's overweight at the gym. It's because you don't shame someone for trying. And when you create an environment that's safe, that feels safe and welcoming and loving, that encourages you to keep doing it. I loved that space. At first, I was scared to go there, and then I found out what it was like, and I loved going to the gym because I loved how everybody made me feel and how they were encouraging me. And I think that is an approach that we need to take in terms of how we interact with people, how we connect with people, how we move through the world. Right? We need to do it with love, compassion, and understanding more than. And I'm not telling you not to be angry. When I say this, people think, "What? You're not angry?" Of course, I'm angry. Listen, I've seen more than most people ever need to see. In terms of being inside factory farms and slaughterhouses and all of that. And sure, if my motivation for what I'm doing became how much I hate everything I've seen, that's reasonable. I could understand that. But again, every action I take would be an affirmation or a reminder of how much I hate everything. Right? So instead, I choose to be motivated by how much I love animals, how much I love the planet, how much I love that I can help people restore their health and happiness. They can find their authentic selves and, again, change the way they move through the world through connection and purpose. Right. And when I do that, every action I take is an affirmation of love, which is inspiring, not exhausting. Because hate is exhausting. Hate is a great motivator for short-term change. I won't deny that. But at least I've never seen evidence of it creating lasting positive change. We can only do that with, again, love, understanding, and compassion. We all have it. We're all capable of it. It just requires a little bit more of us. It just asks a little bit more of us. That's all.
And that is the grandmother's pledge. This is the grandmother's mission, is to love all of humanity back, and in embodying, a love-based approach to bringing people home, to helping people remember their innate wisdom. So thank you. I really appreciate that, because what I hear you say is very much in line with us writing grief mapping, is that when we feel the felt sense shock, we have a choice at any point to live, to dwell in anger, or to move into compassion and empathy and understand what's going on in this whole picture, that none of us, we were just following orders, as Will Tuttle said, when we started eating flesh, and that you needed space to grow and not shame yourself more, because that's what was happening. No one was going to beat you up as much as you've already beat yourself up. And so you didn't have room for more of that. There was no space for more shame. And the only thing that brought space into it was love.
Yeah.
Love and understanding is very expansive.
That offers people the opportunity, whether it's food addiction or drug addiction or being sick or overweight or whatever it is. It allows people to examine the choices that they made and try to understand why these choices felt so good. Even though that they were wrong. What was it about these? What were they offering me? Was it real or not? If you are overweight and depressed, your life is pretty small, right? And there's not a lot of source of pleasure and joy. And so food becomes a great source of pleasure and joy in your life. And then someone says, you need to give that up and adopt a plant-based diet because you're very, you're overweight and you have all these chronic illnesses. And so what that person hears, what I heard when someone said that to me was, I have to give up the biggest source of pleasure in my life on the gamble that they're right. Right? That's a scary place to be. And we have to have understanding for that, and have understanding that people might struggle with making that kind of, basically changing their entire dietary and lifestyle habits. Maybe they don't go vegan overnight. Maybe you did. Great. So this person isn't. If they're, we have to accept whatever their level of effort is. And I always tell people, I don't need someone to be vegan right now. I need everyone to honestly, whatever honestly looks like to them, honestly be reducing their intake of animal products. If that's in 100% one day, awesome. If it's 10% today, great. What can we do to make it 11% tomorrow? That's it.
Beautiful. I love your understanding and the building on what is possible. And that's what we're doing here. There will be 11% vegans, throughout the world very, very soon. And then we will build on that. And we will be 12 and 13, and we'll just keep increasing until we live in a vegan world. Thank you for the very compassionate, loving, and understanding interview. I have my spirit feels quite upgraded just being in your presence. So thank you, Bobby, very much for your humble, beautiful presence.
Thank you. And thank you for the work that you're doing.